The sound of steel doors slamming echoed through the massive dormitory on Rikers Island. Shouts, curses and screams cut through the humid night air as dozens of men erupted in chaos. Inmates surged toward each other, fists flying, makeshift weapons flashing under the red alarm lights. Guards tried to push their way inside, shields raised, batons in hand, but the crowd of bodies was too thick. In that moment, the prison's notorious reputation for violence and overcrowding was on full display. Some inmates climbed onto bunks for higher ground, while others cornered weaker men, beating them with whatever they could grab. Broken broom handles, sharpened toothbrushes, even food trays. Blood stained the cracked tile floors as the smell of sweat and fear grew heavier. One officer shouted into his radio, his voice nearly drowned out by the chaos. "We need backup now!" The dorm had nearly double the number of men it was built to hold. Rows of bunks lined up only inches apart, left no space for escape, no place to hide. Inmates trampled over each other as guards finally broke through, swinging batons, shouting commands, trying desperately to stop the madness. But then, just as order seemed possible, one prisoner broke free from the crowd. His face was pale with rage, and in his hand he gripped a sharpened metal shard, something torn from the frame of a bunk. He raised it high, eyes locked on a rival across the room. The dorm froze for a split second, everyone watching to see if he would strike. The guards lunged forward, but they were too far away. And then, weeks earlier, the atmosphere on Rikers Island had already been tense. The prison, located in New York City, had long been criticized for being one of the most dangerous jails in America. Built decades ago, its walls were crumbling, its systems outdated, and its dorms filled far beyond safe limits. What was meant to see a manageable number of people now held thousands, many of them waiting years for trial. For inmates, daily life was a struggle. Some tried to keep to themselves, spending hours reading old books, writing letters, or staring out narrow windows at the East River. Others formed alliances for protection, banding together in groups that fought constantly for control of dorms and hallways. Even small disagreements could turn violent. A missing pair of sneakers, a stolen snack, or a careless glance might spark a fight that could spiral into something far worse. One inmate, Marcus Taylor, knew this too well. He had been locked up at Rikers for nearly 9 months, awaiting his trial on burglary charges. He kept his head down, avoided eye contact, and tried to stay invisible. But invisibility was hard in a place where space was so limited. Every bunk was filled, and inmates often had to sleep inches away from men they barely knew. At night, the sounds of snoring mixed with arguments, whispered threats, and the clang of guards making their rounds. Despite the danger, there were moments of uneasy calm. Inmates played cards with worn decks, swapped stories about their lives outside, and sometimes laughed over memories of freedom. But beneath the surface, anger simmered. Rumors spread quickly, about guards mistreating prisoners, about gangs planning fights, about men being denied medical care. Tension built, day by day, like pressure in a sealed container. Reform efforts had been promised. Politicians spoke on television about closing Rikers, about creating smaller, safer jails spread across the city. Activists demanded justice. Families of inmates begged for change, and officials toured the crumbling halls, taking notes on clipboards. But for the men living inside the jail, these promises felt far away. Each day was a battle for survival, and nothing seemed to change. Then came the night that turned rumor into reality. Marcus had been sitting on his bunk, trying to block out the noise of arguments brewing across the dorm. 2 groups of inmates had been trading insults for days. Everyone knew something was coming. Guards paced the hall, restless but distracted. Then suddenly, a chair scraped across the floor, a fist flew, and the dorm exploded into chaos. Marcus dove to the ground as bodies surged past him. He saw one man swing a metal tray into another's head. He saw a guard get shoved backward, his shield slipping from his grip. The crowd roared, each punch fueling the frenzy. Marcus tried to crawl toward the corner, but the tide of men was too strong. As the guards pushed forward, Marcus spotted something that made his blood run cold. A prisoner pulling a jagged piece of metal from under his mattress. The man's eyes burned with fury as he raised the weapon, ready to strike down anyone in his path. And in that instant, the violence reached a terrifying peak. The prisoner's hand shook as he clutched the sharpened shard of metal, his arm pulled back to strike. For a second, time seemed to slow. Marcus, crouched against the cold concrete wall, could barely breathe. Everyone in the dorm, guards and inmates alike, waited for the blow. But before the weapon could come down, 2 guards lunged, slamming into the man with their shields. The shard clattered to the floor, skidding under a bunk. Shouts filled the room as more officers stormed in, wielding batons and pepper spray. Clouds of burning mist filled the air, choking anyone who breathed too deeply. Inmates coughed, rubbed their eyes, and stumbled blindly. Some fell to the floor, groaning in pain, while others were dragged away in restraints. The chaos ended as quickly as it had begun, but the damage was clear. Blood streaked the floor, broken bunks leaned at odd angles, and severed. Men lay injured, clutching their heads and arms. Marcus sat frozen, his heart pounding. He had survived another outbreak of violence, but he knew it would not be the last. That night, as the dorm settled into a tense silence, Marcus thought about the strange world he was trapped in. Violence seemed to erupt without warning, fueled by the overcrowding, the anger, and the hopelessness. Guards were outnumbered, inmates were desperate, and reform? It always felt like something promised tomorrow, but never delivered today. The next morning, word spread across the jail like wildfire. Men whispered about the fight, about the inmate with the shard, about who had been beaten and who had been taken to medical. Some bragged about surviving the chaos, while others kept quiet, eyes darting nervously as if expecting the violence to return at any second. Marcus heard a rumor that one of the injured men might not make it. Whether it was true or not, he couldn't tell. But in Rikers, truth and rumor blurred together until no one knew the difference. That afternoon, officials toured the facility, walking past rows of bunks and broken furniture. Clipboards in hand, they scribbled notes, whispering about reforms and closures. Cameras flashed as they promised change to the press waiting outside. "We are committed to improving conditions," one of them declared. But Marcus, watching from his bunk, didn't believe a word. He had seen too much. Still, life went on. Meals were served, cold trays of beans and bread. Some men played cards, others argued over phones. A few, like Marcus, tried to stay invisible, waiting out the endless days. But even in those quieter moments, the memory of the chaos lingered, a reminder that peace inside Rikers was always temporary. Then, 1 week later, it happened again. Marcus was lining up for lunch when 2 inmates shoved each other near the food cart. A plastic tray fell to the ground with a crash. For a moment, the room went still, everyone watching. And then fists flew. The fight spread fast, dragging in men who had nothing to do with the argument. Guards rushed in, but the crowd swallowed them whole. Marcus ducked under a table, heart racing. He saw one inmate slam another's head against the bars. Another man swung a mop handle like a baseball bat. Food spilled across the floor, mixing with blood and sweat. The noise was deafening, a storm of shouts and screams. Suddenly, an alarm blared, louder than before. Reinforcements poured in, dozens of officers in riot gear, shields locking together like a wall. They surged forward, forcing inmates against the walls, pinning them down one by one. The room shook with the force of boots and batons. When it was over, the dorm looked like a battlefield. Injured men were dragged out on stretchers. The smell of pepper spray and sweat hung in the air. Marcus sat trembling, his back against the wall, staring at the devastation around him. Later that night, he overheard 2 guards talking quietly near the door. "This place can't go on like this," one said. "They've got to shut it down. It's not safe for anyone." The other guard nodded, his face pale. But until they do, we're stuck. For Marcus, the words echoed in his mind. Reform was coming, that's what they said. But in the meantime, the inmates still had to wake up every day inside Rikers Island, living with the violence, the overcrowding, and the constant fear. As he lay on his bunk, staring at the ceiling, Marcus wondered how much longer he could survive in this place. He knew another fight could break out at any moment, another riot, another life lost. And with each passing day, the line between survival and destruction grew thinner. The future of Rikers Island remained uncertain. Promises were made, tours were given, and reports were written. But inside the jail's crumbling walls, the men trapped there lived a different reality. One filled with danger, desperation, and the faint hope that maybe, one day, reform would arrive before it was too late. And until that day, Rikers Island remained exactly what it had always been, a place where violence, overcrowding, and broken promises collided, leaving everyone inside, guards and inmates alike, caught in a storm with no easy escape.